I have seen defendants scream in my courtroom. I have seen guilty people pretend to faint, innocent people shake so badly they could barely raise their right hand, and arrogant men crumble the moment truth came closer than their lies could survive. But the woman who walked into my courtroom that morning did something I had never forgotten. She refused to stand. Not because she was weak, not because she was injured, not because she misunderstood what was happening. She refused because she wanted everyone in that room to know she believed the rules were beneath her. And 60 seconds later, she was crying so hard she could barely say her own name. Before we go any further, make sure you have subscribed to this channel for more powerful courtroom stories like this one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Also, comment below and tell us where you are watching this video from. Now, let me take you back to where this case truly began. The case looked ordinary on paper. That is what bothered me later. Sometimes the most dangerous cases do not arrive with blood, weapons, or a headline that warns you to prepare yourself. Sometimes they arrive inside a small civil dispute, folded neatly into a file with a few receipts, a few text messages, and two people who claim the other one is lying. This case was filed as a property dispute. A woman named Karen Mitchell was being sued by her former neighbor, Emily Dawson. Emily claimed Karen had taken a custom-made memorial necklace from her apartment during a neighborhood charity event and refused to return it. Karen claimed the necklace had been gifted to her voluntarily and that Emily only wanted it back because she regretted being generous. On paper, it sounded petty. In my courtroom, it felt different before anyone spoke. Emily Dawson came in first. She was 32, small-framed, nervous in a way I recognized immediately. She held a folder against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her eyes moved quickly across the room, not searching for attention, but searching for safety. People who invent stories usually want the stage. Emily looked like she wanted the floor to open and hide her from it. Then Karen Mitchell entered. I noticed her before the bailiff even called the room to order. She was in her late 40s, perfectly dressed, not expensive in a flashy way, but carefully arranged. Cream blazer, gold watch, hair pulled back so tightly it almost looked like another statement of control. She did not glance at Emily. She did not glance at the witness benches. She looked directly toward my chair before I had even stepped out. That matters. Years on the bench teach you to watch the person who thinks the room belongs to them. Most people are nervous in court. They adjust their sleeves, touch their documents, whisper to the person beside them. Look at the flags, look at the clock, look at anything except the judge. But Karen was not nervous. She was assessing, and that is different. When I took the bench, the courtroom stood as it always does. The movement was automatic. Lawyers rose, spectators rose. Emily rose so fast her folder nearly slipped from her hands. Karen remained seated. At first, I thought perhaps she had not heard. The bailiff looked at her and said, "Mom, please stand." Karen did not move. The room changed in a way you could almost feel on your skin. A courtroom is not just wooden walls. It is pressure. It is structure. It is the last place many people believe order still exists when their lives have become chaos. When one person openly challenges that order, everyone senses it. I looked down at her. She looked back at me. There was no confusion in her face, no embarrassment, no panic. Just a small, controlled smile, the kind people use when they are trying to make disrespect look like confidence. I said, Miss Mitchell, stand up." She lifted her chin slightly and said, "I don't stand for people who already decided I'm guilty." You could hear a whisper move through the gallery. Now listen carefully, because this is where many people misunderstand courtrooms. The issue was not my ego. Judges do not need worship. A courtroom does not ask for respect because the judge is special. It asks for respect because without rules, the truth gets buried under performance. If I allowed Karen to decide which rules applied to her, she would do the same thing with every question, every document, every fact. So I watched her for one more second. That 1 second told me more than her entire answer would have. Her eyes did not flicker. Her hands were relaxed. Her breathing was steady. She had prepared that line. She wanted that moment. She wanted Emily to feel small before the hearing even began, and Emily did. I saw Emily lower her eyes. I saw her fingers tighten around the folder. I saw her swallow like a person trying not to cry in front of strangers. That was the first emotional truth in the room. Karen's refusal was not random. It was aimed. I said, "Mrs. Mitchell, you are not here to perform. You are here to answer questions. Stand up." She leaned back, still seated, and said, "I know my rights." That sentence is one of the most abused sentences in any courtroom. People say it when they do not understand their rights. People say it when they want to avoid responsibility. People say it when they have watched too much television and believe defiance is the same as intelligence. But real rights do not protect lies. Real rights do not turn a courtroom into a theater. And real rights do not excuse contempt. I told her calmly, "Your rights are intact. Your judgment is not." For the first time, her smile weakened, only slightly, but I saw it. A judge learns to notice the smallest collapses. A blink held too long, a breath taken too sharply, a finger tapping only after a name is mentioned. The body often confesses before the mouth does. Karen stood. Slowly, not because she accepted the court's authority. She stood because she realized the performance was not working. And that was when I noticed something else. When she finally rose, she did not look angry. She looked annoyed, as though she had been interrupted during a plan she expected to control. She adjusted her blazer, picked up one page from her table, and set it down again. Then she glanced toward Emily for the first time. It lasted less than a second. But Emily flinched. I had seen fear like that before. Not fear of losing money, not fear of embarrassment, something older, something built over time. That was the moment this case stopped feeling like a necklace dispute. I asked Emily to explain why she had filed the claim. Her voice trembled at first, but not because she was weak. There is a difference between weakness and exhaustion. Emily sounded like someone who had repeated the truth so many times to people who did not believe her that saying it again felt like reopening a wound. She told me the necklace had belonged to her late mother. The pendant was made from a small piece of her mother's wedding ring, reset into a silver frame with an engraving on the back. It was not valuable in the way insurance companies calculate value. It was valuable in the way grief calculates value. And grief, believe me, does not use market price. Emily said she wore it every day. Then she described the charity event. The building had hosted a small fundraiser in the common lounge for a local children's hospital. Residents came and went. Karen helped organize the tables. Emily attended for about 40 minutes. At some point, the necklace clasp broke. Emily took it off and placed it inside a small blue jewelry pouch in her purse. Later that night, the pouch was gone. For 3 days, Emily searched her apartment, her car, the hallway, the trash room, even the elevator corners. Then another neighbor told her something strange. Karen had been seen wearing a necklace that looked exactly like Emily's. When Emily confronted her, Karen allegedly laughed and said, "You people always think everything belongs to you." That phrase sat in the room like smoke. I looked at Karen. She rolled her eyes, not openly enough to seem reckless, just enough for me to see she believed Emily was beneath her. I asked Karen if she had the necklace. She said, "I have my necklace." "Did it come from Emily Dawson?" I asked. "No. Where did it come from?" "My late aunt." "What was her name?" Karen paused. It was tiny, barely there, but it was the first pause she had not planned. Then she said, "Margaret." "Margaret what?" "Margaret Mitchell." The gallery shifted again. Some people caught it immediately. Others did not. Emily did. Her face changed. Karen Mitchell had just claimed her aunt had the same last name as hers. That was possible, of course, not suspicious by itself. But she answered too cleanly after the pause, like someone choosing a name from the nearest available shelf. I asked, "Do you have proof this necklace belonged to your aunt?" Karen smiled again. But this time the smile had effort behind it. She said, "I don't carry death certificates and jewelry receipts around like props. That was a mistake." Manipulative people often reveal themselves by mocking the very evidence they fear. They want the room to treat documentation as emotional weakness. They want facts to look theatrical and lies to look dignified. Emily opened her folder. Karen saw it. And for the first time that morning, the woman who refused to stand looked directly at the evidence table, not at me, not at Emily, at the folder. I asked Emily what she had brought. She pulled out a photograph. Her hands shook so badly the bailiff had to carry it to my bench. It was a picture of Emily with her mother at a hospital bedside. Emily was younger in the photo. Her mother was pale, smiling softly, one hand resting on Emily's shoulder. Around Emily's neck was the pendant, the same shape Karen claimed came from her aunt. I looked down at that photograph, then at Karen. The room went still. Karen did not cry then. She did not panic then. She did something much more revealing. She laughed once under her breath, a short, cold sound, and she said, "A lot of necklaces look alike." That was when I knew this woman had not come into my courtroom to defend herself. She had come to humiliate Emily one more time. But what Karen did not know was that Emily's folder contained more than one photograph, and the next piece of evidence was going to change the entire direction of the case. Now, before I tell you what was inside that folder, I need you to understand something about the two women standing in front of me. Court cases are never only about objects. People think they come to court because of a necklace, a broken lease, a damaged car, an unpaid loan. But after enough years on the bench, you learn that the object is often just the doorway. Behind it, there is pride, control, grief, shame, revenge. Sometimes the smallest item in the room carries the heaviest emotional weight. That necklace was not just jewelry. To Emily Dawson, it was the last physical piece of a woman she had buried too soon. To Karen Mitchell, I began to suspect it was something else entirely, a trophy. And I do not use that word lightly. Emily stood at the plaintiff's table with both hands wrapped around the edge, as if the courtroom itself was moving beneath her feet. She was not dressed to impress anyone. A navy blouse, simple black pants, no jewelry except a thin ring on her right hand. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and every few seconds she tucked a strand behind her ear, even though it had not moved. That kind of nervous habit tells you a person is trying to keep control over something small, because everything big feels out of control. Karen, on the other hand, looked like control was her natural language. She had placed her documents in a perfect stack. Her pen sat parallel to the edge of the table. Her purse was closed, centered, and angled away from Emily as if even her belongings had been trained to show superiority. She did not fidget. She did not glance at the bailiff. She did not watch the audience. She watched. That is always interesting. Some litigants watch the opposing party because they are angry. Some watch the jury because they want sympathy. Some watch the floor because they are ashamed. Karen watched the judge because she was calculating the room's power structure, and she believed, at least at the beginning, that she could challenge it. I asked Emily how long she had known Karen. Emily took a breath and said they had lived in the same apartment building in Cedar Falls for almost 4 years. Not friends, exactly. More like the kind of neighbors who pass each other by the mailboxes and make polite comments about weather, parking, or elevator repairs. But Emily said Karen had always inserted herself into other people's lives. At first, it sounded harmless. Karen organized building events. Karen complained to management when hallways were messy. Karen corrected people for leaving packages near the lobby door. She knew who worked nights, who had guests over, who struggled with rent, who had family visiting the way Emily described it. Karen was not simply nosy. She was gathering information. I have seen people like that many times. They do not build relationships. They build files. They remember your weaknesses, not because they care, but because one day weakness can be useful. Karen interrupted. She makes me sound like a criminal for being involved in my community. I looked at her and said, "You will have your turn." She smiled, but her jaw tightened. That was the second crack. Emily continued. She explained that after her mother died, she became more withdrawn. She stopped attending building events, stopped joining group chats, stopped answering casual questions about her personal life. And apparently, Karen noticed. According to Emily, Karen would ask things that sounded friendly but felt invasive. How much did the funeral cost? Are you keeping your mother's things? Did she leave you anything valuable? Are you alone now? That last one made Emily's voice break. The courtroom heard it. Karen looked away for half a second. And believe me, that mattered. People look away from pain for different reasons. Compassion makes some people look away because they cannot bear to watch someone suffer. Guilt makes others look away because the suffering reminds them of what they caused. Karen's face did not show compassion. It showed irritation, as if Emily's emotion was an inconvenience. I asked Karen whether she had asked those questions. She said, "I ask everyone questions. That doesn't mean anything." I said, "It means something if the questions are aimed at someone grieving." Karen's expression hardened. Then came the first explanation she offered for the necklace. She said the pendant had belonged to her Aunt Margaret, who had passed away years earlier. She said she had kept it in a drawer and only recently started wearing it because she felt sentimental. That word caught my attention, sentimental. People who truly carry sentimental items usually explain them with specificity. They remember when they received them. They remember the person's voice. They remember the day, the room, the reason. Emotional memory has texture. Karen's story had none. It had a name and a conclusion. That was all. So I asked her, "What was special about the necklace to your aunt?" Karen blinked. Then she said, "She liked it." Liked it how? She wore it. When? Often. What was engraved on the back? There it was. That question struck her harder than she expected. She did not answer immediately. Emily's eyes lifted. The bailiff turned slightly. Even the spectators leaned in, because silence in a courtroom is never empty. Silence is where the truth often starts making noise. Karen finally said, "I don't remember." "You don't remember the engraving on a sentimental necklace from your late aunt." "I haven't looked at the back in years, yet you wore it recently. I don't inspect everything I wear." That was the moment I began to see the shape of the lie, not the entire lie, not yet, but enough to know she was stepping around something. Her answers were no longer confident. They were defensive, short, narrow, designed to survive the next question rather than explain the truth. Emily then told me about the day she first saw Karen wearing the necklace. It was 6 days after the charity event. Emily had gone downstairs to collect a package. Karen was in the lobby speaking with another resident, Rachel Morgan. Emily said she froze when she saw the pendant against Karen's white blouse. At first, she thought grief had tricked her. That is something people do not understand unless they have lost someone. Grief turns the world into a room full of ghosts. You see your mother's coat on a stranger. You hear her laugh in a grocery aisle. You smell her perfume when no one is there. So Emily did not immediately accuse Karen. "Where did you get that?" Karen allegedly touched the pendant and said, "Why?" Emily said, "Because it looks like mine." And Karen smiled, not surprised, not confused. Smiled, then said, "Maybe yours wasn't as special as you thought." When Emily repeated that sentence in my courtroom, her eyes filled with tears, but she forced herself not to wipe them. Some people think crying in court is a strategy. Sometimes it is. But Emily's tears did not arrive when they helped her. They arrived when remembering made her body betray her. Karen shook her head and muttered, "Ridiculous." I heard it. I always hear more than people think. I asked Karen if she denied saying that. She said, "I deny her interpretation of it." That answer interested me more than a simple denial would have. People who never said something usually say, "I never said that." People who said something cruel but want room to escape often attack the interpretation. I asked again, "Did you say those words?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed. Then she said, "I may have said something similar." And there it was, another crack. The room felt it too. I saw one juror in the back row of the audience section, not a juror for this case, just a citizen waiting for another matter, raise his eyebrows. I saw Rachel Morgan, the neighbor who had come as a witness, press her lips together as if holding back something she badly wanted to say. I turned to Rachel. She had been sitting quietly, middle-aged, brown haircut just above the shoulders, wearing a gray cardigan and holding her handbag in her lap. She looked like the kind of witness people underestimate because she does not demand attention. Those are often the best witnesses. She said she had seen the exchange in the lobby. She confirmed. Emily looked shocked. She confirmed Karen touched the necklace. And then Rachel added something I did not expect. She said Karen had shown her the necklace earlier that same morning. I looked at Karen. Karen stared straight ahead. Rachel continued. She said Karen had leaned toward her near the mailboxes and whispered, "Wait until Emily sees this." The courtroom went cold, not loud, not chaotic cold. There are sentences that reveal theft. There are sentences that reveal cruelty. And then there are sentences that reveal intent. Wait until Emily sees this. That was not the language of an innocent woman wearing a family heirloom. That was the language of someone preparing a wound. Karen immediately, "She's lying." But she said it too quickly. Before Rachel finished speaking, before I asked a question, before the statement had fully settled, innocent people can be angry when falsely accused, yes, but Karen's reaction had a different rhythm. It was not outrage, it was interruption. She wanted to stop the words before they attached themselves to the case. I asked Rachel why she had not come forward sooner. Rachel looked down and said, "Because I was afraid of her." That got my attention, I asked. "Afraid in what way?" Rachel glanced at Karen, then back at me, and for the first time I saw Karen's calm expression change into something sharper. Warning. Rachel said, "Because Karen knows things about people, and when she gets angry, those things become weapons." At that moment, I understood Emily was not the only person in that building who had been living under Karen Mitchell's shadow, but I still had not seen the second photograph. And when Emily finally pulled it from the folder, even Karen could not pretend the case was ordinary anymore. Emily's second photograph was not dramatic at first glance. That is what made it powerful. It was not a close-up of Karen holding the necklace. It was not a security camera still. It was not one of those clean pieces of evidence people imagine when they watch court from the outside. It was a birthday photo, a simple, ordinary birthday photo from 2 years earlier. Emily was standing in a small apartment kitchen beside her mother, Linda Dawson. There was a chocolate cake on the counter, paper plates near the sink, and a few balloons taped crookedly to the cabinet. Linda had one arm around Emily's shoulders. Emily's eyes were red from laughing. Around Emily's neck was the necklace. The pendant was turned slightly sideways. but the engraving on the back was visible, not fully, just enough. I leaned forward. Karen saw me do it. That is one of the strange things about courtrooms. The evidence does not only speak through what it shows, it speaks through how people react when they realize someone else can see it. I asked the bailiff to bring the photograph closer. Emily's hands were shaking again, but this time there was something different behind the fear. Not confidence exactly. More like a person who had carried a truth alone for too long and was finally watching it enter the room. I looked at the back of the pendant in the photograph. The engraving appeared to contain 3 letters, E. DL, I asked Emily what those letters meant. She said, Emily Dawson, Linda. Then she swallowed and corrected herself. My mother used to say it meant Emily and Linda. She had it engraved that way after my father left. She said it was our family, even if there were only 2 of us. The room softened around her words. Even courtrooms have moments like that. I have watched rooms full of strangers suddenly understand a wound they had no connection to. A person can explain value with receipts, but sometimes one sentence explains it better than any appraisal ever could. I turned to Karen. Ms. Mitchell, does your Aunt Margaret have any connection to the initials EDL? Karen said nothing. Not for 3 seconds, not for 4. Then she gave a small laugh, but it sounded weaker than the first one. I don't know what those letters are supposed to prove. I said, they prove the necklace in that photograph had an engraving. I asked you what was engraved on your necklace. You said you didn't remember. I told you I don't inspect everything I wear. You claimed it was sentimental. It is. To whom? To me. Because of your aunt. Yes. And you don't know what is engraved on the back? Her eyes moved to the folder again. That folder had become her enemy. Karen had come into my courtroom believing Emily was fragile. And Emily was fragile in the way people are fragile after loss, harassment, and disbelief. But fragile does not mean false. Fragile does not mean weak. Glass is fragile too, and it can still cut. I asked Karen whether she had brought the necklace to court. She looked offended. No. Why not? Because I didn't think I needed to bring my personal property to be inspected like evidence in some criminal trial. That answer was clever. Not honest. Clever. She was trying to frame the request as invasion. She wanted the room to believe I was overreaching, that Emily was hysterical, that a small claims hearing had become a spectacle because everyone else was unreasonable. That strategy works on people who are afraid of appearing unfair. It does not work on a judge who has heard it too many times. I said, you are being sued for possession of that specific necklace. You knew that before you entered this courtroom. Karen's mouth tightened. I don't have it with me. Where is it? At home. Where at home? In my jewelry box. Which means if this court orders you to produce it, you can. She hesitated, and believe me, that hesitation mattered. A truthful person says yes. A liar checks the distance between the present lie and the next consequence. Karen said, assuming it's there. The courtroom reacted before I did. Emily's head lifted sharply. Rachel Morgan covered her mouth. Even the bailiff shifted his weight, and I had known that bailiff for years. He did not react easily. I asked, what does that mean? Karen folded her arms. It means I have a lot of jewelry. I don't track every little thing. Every little thing. Those words landed directly on Emily. I watched Emily's face collapse for half a second. And that was the moment my patience began to thin. A judge must remain controlled. That is not optional. But control does not mean blind. Control does not mean indifferent. There are moments when cruelty becomes so casual that it tells you more about a person than anger ever could. I said, Miss Mitchell, be very careful. She looked at me with that same polished defiance. Careful about what? About confusing arrogance with credibility. For the first time, the spectators went completely silent. Karen had misjudged me. She had misjudged Emily. But more than anything, she had misjudged the courtroom. She believed calmness made her powerful. But calmness without truth is only decoration. And when pressure comes, decoration cracks. I asked Emily whether she had tried to resolve the matter before filing. She nodded and pulled out printed text messages. Karen immediately objected. "This is private communication." I looked at her and said, "Not anymore." The messages were not long, but they showed a pattern. Emily had written, "Please, Karen, if you have my mom's necklace, I just want it back. I won't make trouble." Karen replied, "You should be more careful with things that matter." Emily wrote, "That necklace is not replaceable. Please." Karen replied, "Then maybe you should have guarded it better." Emily wrote again the next day, "I saw you wearing it. Rachel saw it, too." "Too," Karen replied. "Careful, Emily. Accusing people can get ugly." That word, ugly, I underlined it in my mind. Threats do not always arrive with violence. Sometimes they arrive as a warning wrapped in politeness. Careful. Think about what you're saying. You don't want this to get ugly. People who use those phrases often want fear to do the work their hands cannot. I asked Karen what she meant by that message. She said, "I meant she was making false accusations." "No. You said it could get ugly." It's an expression. An expression of what? Frustration or intimidation. Her eyes sharpened. "That is not fair." I said, "Fairness is not the same as comfort." That was when Emily revealed the next part of the story. After those messages, she said, things in the building changed. Her laundry was removed from the dryer and left on the floor. A maintenance request she filed was mysteriously canceled. Anonymous notes appeared on her door saying, "Stop lying, and nobody believes you." Karen shook her head, but she did not look surprised. That interested me. An innocent person hearing a false accusation like that usually reacts with disbelief first. Confusion, shock, sometimes anger. Karen reacted like someone annoyed that old details were being mentioned in public. I asked if Emily had reported the notes. She said yes to building management. Then Rachel raised her hand slightly. I allowed her to speak. Rachel said she had seen Karen near Emily's door one evening, holding a piece of paper. Karen snapped, "You saw me in a hallway. That's not a crime." Rachel answered quietly, "You were wearing gloves." That sentence changed the temperature of the room again. Karen's face went still, very still. And I have learned something about people who are used to controlling others. When they are truly surprised, they do not always explode. Sometimes they freeze because their mind is moving too fast behind the mask. I asked Rachel to explain. She said it was around 9:30 at night. She had stepped out to take trash to the chute and saw Karen standing near Emily's door. Karen had one hand raised, and Rachel heard paper scrape against the wood. When Karen noticed Rachel, she walked away quickly, putting something into her coat pocket. "Were you sure it was Miss Mitchell?" "Yes." "Why?" Rachel looked at Karen and said, "Because she turned around and told me I should mind my own business unless I wanted people knowing mine." Now we were no longer talking about a missing necklace. We were talking about a campaign of pressure, humiliation, and fear. I looked at Emily again. She was crying silently now, but her posture had changed. She was still afraid, but she was no longer alone in the story. That matters more than people realize. Isolation is where manipulators do their best work. Once witnesses begin speaking, once details connect, once the silence breaks, control begins to slip. Karen felt it slipping, so she changed tactics. She straightened her shoulders and said, "Your Honor, this is absurd. These women clearly planned this. Emily has been unstable since her mother died, and Rachel has always disliked me because I reported her boyfriend for parking violations." There it was, the attack. When facts become dangerous, character assassination often begins. I asked Karen, "Do you have evidence Emily is unstable?" Karen said, "She cries constantly." I looked at Emily, then back at Karen. Grief is not instability. Karen's lips pressed together. She avoids people. Grief is not guilt. She became obsessed with me. No, Miss Mitchell. According to the evidence, she asked for her property back. Karen's face reddened slightly, only slightly. But the mask was heating from underneath. Then I asked one simple question. Who else was inside the lounge during the charity event when Emily says the necklace disappeared? Emily looked down at her folder. Rachel's expression changed. Karen's eyes moved toward the courtroom door. And for the first time, I realized there was another witness who had not yet spoken. A building maintenance worker named Daniel Carter had been sitting in the back row the entire time, quiet, nervous, and holding a manila envelope on his lap. When I called his name, Karen turned pale, not shocked, pale. And that was when I knew Daniel Carter had brought something to court Karen never expected me to see. Daniel Carter did not look like a man who wanted attention. That was the first thing I noticed. He stood slowly from the back row, holding the manila envelope against his chest with both hands. He was maybe 36, wearing a faded work jacket with the apartment building's maintenance logo stitched over the pocket. His boots were clean but worn at the edges. His face had the tired look of a man who fixed other people's problems for a living and had learned not to get involved in their personal wars. But that morning, Daniel Carter had gotten involved. And Karen Mitchell knew it. The moment he stepped forward, Karen stopped watching me. She watched him. Her eyes narrowed, not in confusion, but in calculation. She was trying to measure how much he knew, how much he would say, and whether there was still time to frighten him into silence. I have watched that look many times. It is the look of someone who is used to controlling witnesses before they become witnesses. I asked Daniel to come to the witness area and tell the court what he had brought. His voice was low at first. He said, "Your Honor, I didn't want to be part of this." Karen immediately said, "Then don't be." I turned my head toward her, not sharply, not loudly, just enough. "Miss Mitchell?" One more interruption, and you will not like what happens next. For the first time since she refused to stand, Karen looked down, only for a moment, but she looked down. That told me the pressure was finally reaching her. Daniel placed the manila envelope on the witness table. Before he opened it, I asked him how he knew both women. He explained that he had worked maintenance at the building for 6 years. He knew Emily because he had repaired her kitchen sink twice and replaced a broken lock after her mother passed away. He knew Karen because, in his words, everybody in that building knew Karen. There was no sarcasm in his voice. That made the sentence worse. I asked what he meant. Daniel hesitated. Then he looked at Karen and said, "She liked knowing things, and she liked people knowing that she knew." That was the clearest description of Karen Mitchell I had heard all morning. Some people seek power through money, some through intimidation, some through charm. Karen's power came from information. She watched, she collected, she remembered, and when necessary, she turned private details into weapons. I asked Daniel what he saw during the charity event. He said he had been called to the lounge twice that evening because one of the folding tables had a loose leg, and later because a kitchen outlet stopped working. He remembered Emily being there. He remembered Karen managing the donation table. He also remembered seeing Emily near the side counter, searching inside her purse. Emily nodded faintly. Daniel said he heard Emily say, "My necklace pouch is missing." Then he saw Karen walk from the lounge toward the side hallway, alone holding something small and blue. At those words, Emily covered her mouth. Karen said, "That is a lie." This time, her voice was not smooth. It had an edge to it. I asked Daniel whether he was certain about the color. He opened the envelope and removed a folded paper. It was a printed maintenance incident log. That got my attention. Daniel explained that after the fundraiser, management asked him to document the outlet repair, the table issue, and the time he left the lounge. On that same log, in a note he made for himself, he wrote, "Resident Mitchell left lounge with blue pouch, possible lost item. I looked at the date, the same night, the same hour." Now, handwritten notes are not magic. They do not prove everything by themselves. But contemporaneous notes matter because they are created before lawsuits, before accusations, before people have time to shape memories around strategy. Karen understood that too. That is why her face changed. She leaned forward and said, "He could have written that any time." Daniel answered, "I didn't." Karen snapped, "You always hated me." Daniel looked at her, and what I saw in his face was not hatred, it was fatigue. He said, "No, Karen, I was tired of being scared of you." And then silence, not the ordinary silence of people listening. The kind of silence that arrives when a room realizes a story is bigger than anyone admitted. I asked Daniel why he had not reported the blue pouch immediately. He swallowed. Because 2 days later, Miss Mitchell came to the maintenance office. Karen's hand moved to her purse, a small movement. But I saw it, Daniel continued. He said Karen walked in while he was logging a repair request and closed the office door behind her. She asked him if he had heard Emily complaining about missing jewelry. Daniel said yes. Karen then told him, "Emily is emotional right now. You shouldn't encourage her delusions." I watched Emily when he repeated those words. Her eyes closed. That told me she had heard that language before. Delusional, unstable, obsessed. Emotional are not just insults. They are tools. They are words people use when they want a victim's pain to look like evidence against them. Daniel said Karen then mentioned his teenage son. The courtroom shifted again. I asked, "What did she say about your son?" Daniel looked ashamed, though he had no reason to be. He said his son had been caught vandalizing a bus shelter the previous year. It was handled privately. Community service, restitution. No public record anyone in the building should have known about Karen knew. She told Daniel it would be unfortunate if building management found out what kind of family he had. That was when I looked at Karen and saw the truth beginning to circle her like a storm. She was not just accused of stealing a necklace. She was accused of silencing a witness. I asked Daniel if he interpreted that as a threat. He said, "Yes, Your Honor." Karen laughed again, but now the laugh sounded brittle. "This is ridiculous. Everybody in that building shares gossip. I can't be blamed because he has a guilty conscience." There it was again, attack the witness. Never answer the conduct. I asked Karen, "Did you speak to Daniel Carter in the maintenance office 2 days after the event?" She said, "I speak to maintenance all the time." That is not what I asked. I don't remember every conversation. "Did you mention his son?" I may have. Why? To make conversation. The courtroom almost reacted out loud. Even I had to pause. Because sometimes a lie insults not only the court's intelligence, but the liar's own. I said, "You made conversation by bringing up his child's private juvenile mistake." Karen's face tightened. "I don't know how private it was." Daniel looked down. Emily whispered, "Oh my God." I heard it, and for once I did not correct her because the case had crossed a line. Then Daniel reached back into the envelope. He removed a small flash drive. Karen's entire body stiffened. That was the strongest reaction I had seen from her. Not when Emily cried, not when Rachel testified, not when the messages were read, but when Daniel placed that flash drive on the table. Karen's shoulders locked as if someone had pulled a wire through her spine. I asked what was on it. Daniel said, "Security footage from the hallway outside the lounge." Karen immediately stood halfway from her chair. "You can't use that. That's private building property." I looked at her. "Sit down." She did, but slowly. And this time, she did not look superior. She looked cornered. Daniel explained that the building's main hallway camera did not show the inside of the lounge. But it did show the side hallway leading from the lounge to the service corridor. It also showed the elevator area and the small alcove near the maintenance closet. He said he had saved the footage after Emily filed her first complaint because he had a bad feeling. I asked, "Why did you not provide it sooner?" Daniel looked toward Karen. "Because she told me I would regret it." Karen said nothing. That silence was louder than denial. The footage was played on the evidence screen. I remember the way the courtroom changed when the screen flickered on. Everyone leaned forward, even people who had no connection to the case. There is something about video evidence that pulls oxygen from a room. Words can be argued with. Memories can be attacked. But footage has a cold patience. It waits, it shows. It does not care who is embarrassed. The timestamp showed the night of the charity event, 8:42 p.m. Emily appeared briefly near the lounge entrance, looking through her purse. Her face was worried. She turned toward someone inside the room and seemed to ask a question. Then Karen appeared. She stepped into the hallway. In her right hand was a small blue pouch. The entire courtroom froze. Emily let out a sound that was almost not human, not loud, not dramatic, just a broken little breath, the sound of someone watching the world confirm what she had been forced to defend for weeks. Karen stared at the screen, no expression. That was what disturbed me most. A truly innocent person seeing footage that appears to incriminate them usually reacts with immediate confusion, shock, protest, something spontaneous. Karen's stillness was strategic. She was not processing the truth. She was calculating the next lie. The video continued. Karen walked down the side hallway and stopped near the maintenance closet. She looked over her shoulder. Then she opened the pouch. The camera angle did not show what was inside, but it showed her hand reach in. It showed her remove something small. It showed her place the empty blue pouch on top of a trash bin. Emily began crying. Rachel put her hand over Emily's shoulder, and Karen finally spoke. "That doesn't prove it was her necklace." I looked at her for a long moment. The room was so quiet that I could hear the faint buzz from the evidence monitor. "You are correct," I said. "It proves you had her blue pouch." Karen's eyes flashed. "I didn't say it was hers." "You just did." She blinked, and that was the moment she realized she had stepped into her own trap. I watched the color leave her face, not completely, but enough because in trying to defend herself, she had admitted the one thing she had denied from the beginning. She knew the pouch belonged to Emily. For the first time that morning, Karen Mitchell looked afraid, but the footage was not finished. Daniel said there was another clip, a later one, recorded 6 days after the charity event. The same morning, Emily saw Karen in the lobby wearing the pendant. Karen turned toward Daniel with pure hatred in her eyes. And before I could even ask him to play it, Daniel said something that made Emily stop crying and made every person in that courtroom lean forward. He said, "Your Honor, the second video shows what she did after Emily confronted her." Daniel Carter's words hung over that courtroom like a warning. The second video shows what she did after Emily confronted her. I have heard confessions shouted in anger. I have heard witnesses collapse under cross-examination. I have watched defendants realize in real time that the truth had finally caught up with them. But nothing in that room prepared me for what appeared on that screen next, because the second video did not simply show Karen Mitchell wearing the necklace. It showed why she had taken it. And when that truth came out, the woman who had refused to stand for my courtroom 60 seconds earlier finally broke in front of everyone. Daniel's hand trembled slightly as he connected the flash drive again. I noticed that, not because he was unsure of what he had brought, but because he understood the weight of it. Some evidence is just information. Other evidence changes the way people in a room see each other forever. Karen kept her eyes fixed on the screen. Emily could barely look at it. Rachel Morgan stood close to Emily, one hand resting lightly against her back. That small gesture mattered to me. Until that morning, Emily had been alone with her grief, alone with her accusation, alone with the fear that everyone would decide she was unstable, dramatic, or mistaken. Now the room was beginning to see what she had survived. The second clip began in the lobby. The timestamp showed 9:16 a.m., 6 days after the charity event. Karen entered the frame wearing a white blouse and dark slacks. Around her neck, clear as daylight, was the pendant. Emily appeared near the mailboxes a few seconds later, even without audio. Body language can tell a story that words try to hide. Emily stopped immediately. Her shoulders dropped. Her hand went to her chest, to the place where that necklace used to rest. She took one step forward, then stopped, as if her body wanted to confront Karen, but her fear was pulling her backward. Karen saw her and smiled. I remember that smile more clearly than I remember many verdicts. It was not surprise. It was not guilt. It was not the nervous smile of someone caught in an awkward misunderstanding. It was satisfaction. Karen touched the pendant with 2 fingers and turned slightly, making sure Emily could see it. Then she leaned in close enough that whatever she said made Emily step backward. In the courtroom, Emily covered her mouth. I asked her quietly, "Is that the moment you described earlier?" She nodded. She told me maybe mine wasn't as special as I thought. Karen said, "There's no audio." That was true. And in a courtroom, truth matters even when it helps the person you do not trust. There was no audio. The video could not prove those exact words, but it proved the encounter. It proved the necklace. It proved Karen's posture, Karen's timing, Karen's expression. And sometimes behavior is the shadow a lie casts on the wall. Daniel then said, "Your Honor, there's more." The footage continued. Emily left the lobby quickly, wiping her face. Karen watched her go. Then Karen turned toward Rachel, who was standing near the mailboxes. Karen appeared to say something. Rachel's body stiffened. Karen walked away toward the elevator. Then the clip changed. Now the camera showed the hallway near Emily's apartment. The timestamp was later that same day, 11:48 a.m. Karen appeared again. This time she was not wearing the necklace. She looked down the hallway once, then walked toward Emily's door. She pulled something from her purse, a white envelope. She slid it under the door. The courtroom went completely still. Emily whispered, "That was the first note." I asked Daniel whether there was footage from the hall showing the note being placed. He said yes. Karen suddenly stood up, not halfway this time, all the way. "This is harassment," she said. "You're letting them humiliate me." I looked at her and said, "Mrs. Mitchell, sit down." She did not. The same woman who had refused to stand now refused to sit. That irony was not lost on anyone in the room. Her face had changed. The polished confidence was gone. Her eyes were bright, her breathing uneven, her mouth tightening around words she could barely control. "You already decided," she said. "All of you already decided." I said, "No, Miss Mitchell, the evidence is deciding." That sentence hit her harder than I expected. She sat down slowly, and then Daniel played the next clip. This one was from the service corridor. The timestamp was 12:03 p.m. Karen entered the corridor and opened the door to the trash room. She looked over her shoulder again. Then she removed the pendant from her purse. For 1 second, she held it in her hand. The camera was above and angled, but the pendant caught the light. Emily made a sound, and Rachel tightened her arm around her. Karen stared at the necklace in the video for a moment. Then she took out a small tool, a screwdriver. As I leaned forward, so did everyone else. Karen placed the pendant on the edge of the utility sink and began scraping the back. The courtroom erupted, not with shouting, but with a wave of shock. Gasps, whispers, a chair shifting hard against the floor. Emily stepped backward as if she had been physically struck. Karen in the courtroom said, "No." It was the first honest-sounding word she had spoken all morning, but it was not denial. It was panic. On the screen, Karen kept scraping. Her movements were quick, aggressive, desperate. She was trying to damage the engraving, trying to erase EDL, trying to remove the one detail that tied the necklace to Emily and her mother. That was the reveal. Not just that Karen had taken it, not just that she had worn it, but that after Emily recognized it, Karen tried to destroy the proof of what it was. I have sentenced people for acts that were legally worse. I have presided over cases with higher dollar amounts, larger claims, and deeper criminal consequences. But I will tell you something directly, because you deserve to understand what that moment felt like from the bench. There is a special kind of cruelty in stealing from grief. And there is an even darker cruelty in trying to erase the name of the dead so the living cannot prove they loved them. Emily began to sob, not loudly, not theatrically. Her knees seemed to weaken, and Rachel held her steady. Daniel looked down, ashamed that he had not acted sooner. Even the bailiff, who had seen enough courtroom chaos to harden most men, looked away for a moment. Karen kept saying, "No, no, no." But the video kept playing. Footage does not stop because a lie is uncomfortable. The clip showed Karen finish scraping the back of the pendant. Then she wiped it with a tissue, placed it into a small plastic bag, and tucked it into her purse. Before leaving the service corridor, she looked directly up toward the camera. That was important. She knew the camera was there, which meant she believed one of two things. Either the footage would never be reviewed, or she had enough power over the building staff to make sure it disappeared. I asked Daniel why the footage had not been given to management immediately. He looked devastated. Because she came to me that night. Karen shook her head. Tears beginning to form now, Daniel continued. He said Karen came to the maintenance office after hours and asked if the hallway cameras were working. When Daniel said yes, she told him she needed the footage deleted because Emily was having an episode and might use it to create drama. I asked him if he deleted it. "No, Your Honor." Karen turned toward him. "You told me you did." There it was. The courtroom froze. Karen realized it 1 second too late. Daniel closed his eyes. Emily stopped crying. Rachel's mouth fell open. And I sat there looking at Karen Mitchell as the most damaging words of the morning came not from a witness, not from a document, not from a video, but from Karen herself. "You told me you did." In trying to attack Daniel, she admitted she had asked him to delete the footage. That was the viral moment. That was the moment every person in that courtroom understood the mask had fallen. Karen put both hands over her mouth. For the first time, she looked like a person who could not control the room, could not control the evidence, could not control the witnesses, and could not control herself. Then she started crying. Not soft tears of remorse, not grief, fear. There is a difference, and a judge learns to recognize it. Remorse looks outward. It sees the damage done to someone else. Fear looks inward. It sees the consequence coming. Karen's shoulders shook. Her face turned red. She kept repeating, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." That sentence told me more than any apology could have. Because she did not say she did not do it. She did not say Emily was lying. She did not say the necklace was hers. She said she did not mean for it to go this far, meaning she meant for it to go somewhere. I asked her, "How far did you mean for it to go, Miss Mitchell?" She could not answer. I said, "Did you take Emily Dawson's necklace?" She cried harder. "Did you take it?" Her hands trembled against the table. "I found it." "Where?" "In the lounge, inside the blue pouch." She nodded. "Did you return it?" No answer. "Did you wear it so Emily would see it?" She covered her face. I waited. A courtroom can survive silence better than it can survive lies. Finally, she whispered. I wanted her to stop acting like everyone owed her sympathy. Emily looked at her as if those words had cut through whatever piece of her heart was still protected. Karen continued, voice breaking now, but still poisoned by resentment. She walked around like her sadness made her special. Everyone felt sorry for her. Everyone checked on her. I organized that fundraiser. I did the work, and all anyone talked about was poor Emily and her mother. That was the truth beneath the theft jealousy, not of money, not of status, of compassion. Karen Mitchell had stolen a dead woman's necklace because she resented the attention grief brought to the daughter left behind. The courtroom did not move. I have seen ugly motives before, but this one disturbed me because it was so small and so human in the worst possible way. Some evil enters a courtroom wearing rage. Some enters wearing greed. Karen's entered wearing a cream blazer, a gold watch, and a smile that said she deserved more sympathy than a grieving daughter. I asked where the necklace was now. Karen wiped her face and said, "At my apartment." "Damaged?" She nodded. Emily turned away. I asked, "Can the engraving still be seen?" Karen whispered, "Some of it." At that moment, I looked at Emily. She was no longer simply crying over an object. She was watching someone admit they had tried to erase her mother's last mark from the world. And then Karen said one final thing that made the entire courtroom go silent again. She looked at Emily and said, "I was going to give it back after you apologized." Emily stared at her. I stared at her. Even after everything, Karen still believed Emily owed her something. And that was when I knew my ruling could not simply return a necklace. It had to restore the truth Karen tried to bury. When Karen said Emily should have apologized, I saw something in that courtroom that I have never been able to forget. Emily did not shout. She did not lunge across the room. She did not call Karen evil or cruel or heartless, though many people in that gallery were probably thinking those exact words. She just stood there, staring at the woman who had taken the last gift from her mother, damaged it, worn it like a trophy, and then somehow decided she was the one who deserved an apology. That kind of silence is heavier than anger. Anger gives pain somewhere to go. Silence traps it in the chest. I looked at Karen Mitchell, and I knew that whatever ruling I made had to do more than settle property. It had to name what had happened clearly, because manipulators survive in confusion. They survive when people say, maybe she didn't mean it, or maybe it was a misunderstanding, or maybe everyone overreacted. No, there are cases where misunderstanding is possible. This was not one of them. I asked Karen one final time, "Do you currently possess the necklace?" She wiped her face with both hands and nodded. "Yes." "Is it at your apartment?" "Yes." "Is it the same necklace Emily Dawson has identified in the photographs?" Her lips trembled. "I think so." I leaned forward slightly. "Miss Mitchell, this is not the moment for thinking." The room held its breath. She looked down and whispered, "Yes." That one word did not heal anything, but it gave truth a place to stand. I ordered Karen to return the necklace immediately, not later that week, not when convenient, not after she found time to collect herself. Immediately. The bailiff contacted building management, and arrangements were made for an officer to accompany Karen to retrieve it after court. Then I addressed damages. Now, some people watching this may think it was just a necklace. And if you think that, I want you to listen carefully. Courts do not only measure harm by price tags. The law has rules, limits, categories, and standards, yes. But a judge must also understand conduct. Karen did not accidentally pick up the wrong item. She took a pouch she knew did not belong to her. She kept the contents. She displayed the necklace to wound Emily. She threatened witnesses. She tried to destroy identifying marks, and then in court, she lied until the evidence left her nowhere to hide. that matters. I awarded Emily the full replacement value supported by her claim, additional damages for the destruction and alteration of the pendant, filing costs, and every allowable expense connected to bringing the case forward. I also made a direct referral for review of possible theft, witness intimidation, and destruction of property. That was no longer a simple neighborhood dispute. Karen's choices had carried the matter beyond embarrassment. Karen began crying again when she heard that. But again, I watched carefully. She was not crying for Emily. She was crying for herself. There is a moment in many hearings when a person finally understands that charm, intimidation, and status will not rescue them. For Karen, that moment arrived when she realized the courtroom she refused to stand for was the only room in the building where Emily's voice could no longer be buried. I turned to Emily. She was still shaking, but there was something steadier in her eyes. Not joy. Do not misunderstand me. Justice is not always joy. Sometimes justice is simply the first breath after drowning. I told her, Miss Dawson, your mother's memory was never on trial here. Her face broke, but this time the tears were different. I said, what happened to you was not your fault. You were not unstable for wanting back what belonged to you. You were not dramatic for grieving, and you were not wrong to come to court. Emily nodded, but she could barely speak. Then she said something that quieted the entire room. I just wanted her name back, not the money, not revenge, not humiliation, her mother's name. That is what Karen had tried to scrape away. And that is what the courtroom gave back to her. When the necklace was returned later, it was exactly as Karen had admitted. Damaged, scratched. The engraving was scarred, but not completely gone. The E was faint. The D had been scraped through the middle. The L remained visible, stubborn, and sharp, as if Linda Dawson herself had refused to disappear. Emily held it in both hands. I watched her thumb move over the ruined letters. No one spoke. Even Karen, for once, had nothing to say, and I remember thinking that some objects carry more testimony than people ever could. That little pendant had survived theft, arrogance, jealousy, and a screwdriver. It came back wounded, but it came back telling the truth. Karen was escorted out under supervision after the hearing. She did not look at Rachel. She did not look at Daniel. And she certainly did not look at Emily. People like Karen often mistake exposure for injustice. They believe the worst thing that happened is that everyone saw what they did. But the worst thing was what she did before anyone saw. Rachel stayed beside Emily. Daniel apologized to her in the hallway. I was told later that Emily accepted his apology, not because his silence had not hurt her, but because she understood fear. That is something victims often understand better than anyone else. Fear does not always make people cruel. Sometimes it makes them quiet. Karen had counted on that quiet. She had counted on Emily being too broken to fight. She had counted on Rachel being too afraid to speak. She had counted on Daniel being too threatened to bring the footage. And above all, she had counted on the courtroom being another place where confidence could overpower truth. She was wrong. That is what I want you to remember. The loudest person in the room is not always the strongest. The calmest liar is not more credible than the trembling victim. And grief does not make someone unreliable. Sometimes grief is the very reason a person holds on to the truth when everyone else tells them to let it go. I have presided over cases involving far greater sums of money than that necklace. I have seen estates worth millions tear families apart. I have seen business partners destroy decades of friendship over contracts and signatures. But this case stayed with me because it revealed something small and ugly that exists in ordinary places: a hallway, a lobby, a charity event, a neighbor who smiles while collecting your weaknesses, a grieving daughter who keeps being told she is too emotional to be believed, and then finally a courtroom where the lie runs out of places to hide. People ask judges sometimes if we become numb. The truth is, we learn control. We learn discipline. We learn not to let every emotion show on our face, because a courtroom depends on order. But numb? No. Not if you are paying attention. That morning affected me. Not because Karen refused to stand. That was only the beginning. It affected me because I watched a woman try to erase another woman's mother from a piece of silver, then cry only when she realized she could not erase the evidence. There is a difference between being sorry and being caught. Karen Mitchell was caught. Emily Dawson deserved better than what happened to her. But she left that courtroom with something Karen never expected her to recover: her voice, her truth, and the last visible letter of her mother's name still shining through the damage. So when people ask me why respect matters in a courtroom, I think about this case. I think about Karen sitting there with that controlled little smile, refusing to stand because she believed rules were for other people. 60 seconds later, she was crying, not because I raised my voice, not because anyone attacked her, but because truth entered the room, and this time it did not sit down.